Wells Astrological Society, Chapter 1, 9:31 p.m. The camera clips on, but before anything can be established about where the recorder is or what is happening, the image spirals down. For a moment it is unclear what is happening despite the various candles lighting the attic almost perfectly. There is a mass that is not distinctly or easily discernible as anything. It is best regarded as organic in appearance, though it looks like nothing more than a wad of chewed gum the size of a rating desk. It begins to separate in strands, connecting to something just out of frame. Then the shriek that has come to signify the end of the camera person echoes through the closed space. It is not a sound distinctly feminine or masculine, and, in fact, hardly sounds like a scream that could be made on human vocal cords. The shot lingers on the pile until, by means of its strange tendrils, it has disappeared itself. A foot comes into frame, bare and almost with a lack of detail aside from well-defined pumping veins that surge all across the flesh in ways that do not seem reasonable. Another practically primordial howl sounds, and this time is so powerful it begins to clip the microphone until the audio ceases. The candles are quickly snuffed out until only blackness can be captured by the camera. There is only a final brief instant when the frame spins about wildly, catching the moonlight again and again in its rotations. The form of the cameraman is impossible to see, and the owner of the barefoot can only barely be glimpsed as it shuffles away into the shadows of the attic, unidentified. What I see, what the stars have shown me, is not good, my friend, remarked Clovis, the radio host. No, no, what I see come for you, not too far off either, is nothing you want to know about, young Keith. Come on, I called in and you said you could read my future. How does not telling me what it is count? You're just saying it's bad, the caller remarked with a hint of irritation. He had been on the line for almost 10 minutes, just long enough for Lyle to catch most of the broadcast. Though it wasn't really his thing, Lyle had gotten used to hearing the sporadic and rarely scheduled broadcasts from the Wells Township Astrological Society. Astrology, he figured, was something from hacks and frauds, and people who couldn't put their faith in church, so instead they put it in the stars. The same kind of people believed it, Lyle guessed, that also put up with this irregular broadcast that could only really get picked up out past town either when he was going or coming to work. All the same, despite the quirks, he found Clovis Young, the guide to the stars, to be at least entertaining when it failed to be intriguing. Well, it goes like this, Mr. Keith. I don't usually tell folks what be coming for them unless it's good, 'cause else you gonna try to buck it. And the thing about fate is they don't like getting bucked by no small fries. I tell you, but you start wriggling, trying to get free from destiny like a worm trying to pop off a hook. You'll be sorry, Young remarked, as serious as he had ever been on the broadcast. The caller was silent for a moment, but then retorted, as though in disbelief, Go on, then. You think you're so smart? Tell me. One of them sows you work with is going to fall on you, and it's going to seem like a regular old accident to everyone else, but you're going to snap your neck like a twig. You ain't going to die. You're going to lay under the pig, lying in its waist as it squeals for a while before your friends pull you out. But you ain't ever going to walk again, reported Young. The line began to erupt with profanity, but it was clear Clovis had hung up just seconds after delivering his proclamation. It was audible, the drag he took off his cigarette before closing the show. That seems to be all the time we got tonight, folks. Remember, the lucky numbers this week are 12, 30, 74, and 32, in that order. Until next time, keep your eyes on the stars, folks. Rolling into town, the broadcast cut off, just as the station that had been hijacked comes back in. For a few minutes, as Lyle coasts the final few blocks home, he doesn't hear the music, just Young's voice in his head. He tried to memorize the numbers, not that he cared, but he's started a small bet with himself. Putting his car in park, he digs a pen out from the passenger seat and quickly scrolls the numbers down on her seat. He makes sure 32 comes after 74, expecting the order to have something to do with how prominent their appearance will be. It seems reasonable to say 12 or 30 would commonly arise, which is why they were first and second. But 74 and 32 were slightly more uncommon numbers that would be less regular in occurrence. If anything came up with the latter two, he might placate a strange suspicion, but he doubted it would be of any importance. The night was young, the coming summer sun hardly pressed into the evening of its sky, but Lyle knew he'd be out in only a few hours, keeping an odd schedule made for poor nightlife, but he had his options pretty plainly laid out in front of him. He could stay awake a few more hours before trying to get sleep later in the night, but that would only result in less sleep. Miss Jones's kids in the neighboring apartment would be up with the rising sun and be just as abrasive as their cheers and shouts filtered through his window. If he went to bed shortly, he would get a full night's rest and then have those odd hours before dawn as his private time. He became accustomed to those twilight hours, wherein very few stirred in the apartment building, if any, and just a few cars populated the roads. It was a time when running any errand was impossible and television was nothing but infomercials, but there was something cozy about that time of day for Lyle. However, in that comfort, he found boredom, but that was quickly diminished by his freelance work. Learning to edit film was not Lyle's idea of working in movies, or really any idea he had come up with himself. There hadn't been money for him to go to school when he graduated, but his uncle had a friend who did freelance film editing for aspiring filmmakers. He wouldn't charge much, if any, and Lyle had been convinced that the road to a promising career as a director would start in learning the basics. And so, 2 summers prior, he had taken Michael up on his offer and learned how best to edit, amplify, and enhance films for some of the locals. A lot of his work now consisted of touching up family gatherings and other such occasions for the types of people who filmed every birthday and track meet. It had become pretty humdrum, but it kept him busy, and whether he'd admit it or not, helped him hone his craft. Bringing up the lighting in a dimly lit dining room for the Lemieux's grandson's birthday, correcting the levels to make the priest's voice more audible in Leslie and Jake's wedding, and even cutting together bits and pieces of Lila and Maggie's excursion down to Florida had all been worthwhile ventures. It hadn't made him rich. It had made him some extra money, but it was nothing against what he thought it would bring in. The lack of monetary value in his work didn't deter him, but Lyle couldn't help but think he could make more of his talents. Just the right project could be his ticket out of an apartment in scenic nowhere Midwest to the new home in Silicon Valley. He knew he had just had to find the right film.